If you're anything like me, you do not enjoy dating apps. If you're anything like me, you may have told yourself, I am not participating in online dating anymore. If you're really like me, you made a podcast 5 months ago declaring to the world that you were absolutely done with apps, and with good reason, I might add. But if you're me, you are here to say that you lied. So, today we're going to talk about how Bumble BFF is kind of changing my perception of dating apps. Now, I will say, first off, I still hold most of the opinions from the last video. It was titled Why I'm Breaking Up with Apps. And I basically was saying how I don't like dating apps for, in my opinion, good reason. Okay. Let's summarize why I don't like dating apps. Okay, I really don't like dating apps because I feel like the more time I spend on an app, the more I feel like I was missing something in my life and feeling like I should have found a partner by now. And that felt like a lot of pressure I was adding onto my life when anytime I'm not on the apps, I actually don't even prioritize dating, and I therefore don't even feel like I'm missing anything. So I feel like that's one of the main reasons, definitely. And just how I felt on dating apps. Again, I felt like it was a distraction, kind of like social media. I just kept, I would get into the cycle of, oh, I'm using this maybe a little bit too much. Okay. So if you want the full spiel, you can definitely go back. This is one of my most listened to episodes ever. So if you're curious about it, definitely go listen. But I want to talk about Bumble BFF today and why and how Bumble Friends, which is essentially the extension of Bumble that is specifically geared towards finding friendship. And I've been using it and I want to talk about that. But I want to talk about how that's kind of changing my perception of dating apps a little bit. And obviously, there is a factor of like looking for friendship versus looking for love. Okay. Of course, everyone's intentions are a little bit different on the apps. But I think for me, I'm going to state that the ultimate goal is to find love. Okay. And that's where I'm coming from. Again, I know that not everyone on the apps is looking for that, and that's okay. So before we get into it, hello, my name is Vic. Welcome to Mindset Matters, the podcast where we choose to live with purpose and grow with intention. I am a mindset and personal growth coach who helps young adults discover their passions so that they can live a life that is happy and filled with purpose. So you can check out my work below at mindsetmatterswithvic.com. But let's get into today. Today is kind of a fun topic for me. Dating is always one of those interesting ones where I think hearing different opinions on dating can just be an interesting topic. And I think a lot of my most listened to episodes, or in my category of most listened to episodes, definitely the ones I've done on dating are up there. So Bumble BFF, okay? Again, Bumble BFF is an app specifically, or an extension of Bumble, a version of Bumble, which is specifically geared towards finding friends. Okay, so I used Bumble years ago when I was living in France, probably about 4 years ago. And I actually met one of my best friends to this day, hi Tess, on Bumble BFF. Now, I would say that was really my only major positive experience on Bumble BFF. It was also during COVID times, so it was kind of awkward and I didn't really get to meet a ton of people. So I would say overall, I had one successful friendship, still really close with this girl to this day. Love that for me. So I recently moved to a new city. I'm still in Canada, but I'm living in Vancouver now. And I was talking to Tess, and she was on, at one point, I had called her, and she was actually on a Bumble date. And I was like, oh, maybe I should get back on this. I think it's something that you think about doing more when you're traveling abroad, but there's something about being in your own city or your own country that, I don't know, at least for me, I didn't really think about it. But I know so many people who've moved out here, and I figured there was going to be a lot of people who maybe have moved out here and are in a similar situation looking for friendship. Um, in the last week, I have been on 4 Bumble BFF dates, and I would say I'm 4 for 4. Okay. A few of the girls I really connected with, but all of them were super sweet and people I would definitely see again. And just the success rate of like literally feeling like I'm 4 for 4 with these women, I was like, wait a second, okay, how is it that my first four, like I'm literally at a 100% rate of meeting awesome women that I would see again. Whereas on the dating apps, I was feeling just like burnt out because nothing was happening, or it's so hard to connect with people, or, I just wasn't meeting the right type of guy, essentially. Okay. And first of all, I don't want to make this a thing that's like men versus women, because I definitely think there is something to say about that. Of, some generalizations I'm going to make are that women tend to be a little bit more intentional, a little bit more thoughtful in the way that they message you. Like they actually read your profile and comment on things. Sometimes I've found that on the dating apps, like it's clear that a guy didn't even look at any of like the prompts that I wrote, which fair, I guess. But I just find like, okay, women are a little more intentional. It's easier to just like chat with them. Okay. And of course, there is a big difference between being on an app to find friendship versus to find love. And I think that's where I want to steer this conversation, because it's like when you're on a dating app, I feel like you almost default to like putting this pressure on yourself. And this pressure comes from like, well, the goal is to find a partner. So if I don't find a partner, or if I go on a date that doesn't work out, it's like setting me back, or it's frustrating, or we get like, we feel really disappointed. Versus for me, it's like when I go into a Bumble BFF situation, right, where I'm planning to like hang out with a girl, whatever, it's like I feel so relaxed, because it's like, well, if we don't really vibe, then we don't vibe, and that's okay. And it's like, well, wait, shouldn't dating at the beginning kind of be like that too? Like you can meet up with someone, go on a date, and if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? So I think maybe subconsciously and outwardly, we do add way more pressure on ourselves with dating. I stated in the last video that like I've tried to be the chill girl that just goes with the flow and is okay with, you know, if someone's like, not like if someone's flaky, but I've tried to be the chill girl about dating. But for me, it's very like you're either very intentional, you're very interested, and it's very obvious, or I'm not interested because I don't want this wishy washy thing. Okay. However, as a man, I can see how being very forward and upfront is actually really scary and can be a bit intimidating. Okay. Because there's a lot of rejection that's involved in dating apps. Actually, I want to share a comment from the last video. I was looking up all the comments, and bum 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 bum. Okay, here we go. Most of us men do not like to talk to multiple people at once too, but are forced to do so. From the male perspective, not only are matches hard to come by, but also actual conversations. And also, when some sort of chat does happen, there's a good chance of getting ghosted. So putting all eggs in one basket usually results in disappointment and self-esteem issues. And I really like this comment because I think, it's important to think of both perspectives. As a guy, I think as a woman, I think a lot of women want a man who's willing to really step up and show that they're interested and put in the work to, show that they care about and they really want to get to know you. But I understand from the male perspective, it can be really scary to do so, because what if I really try and I get ghosted or whatever? And I know that can happen on both sides. But I think this is the thing I don't like about the apps is like you just know that everyone is talking to more than one person, or like liking more than one person. And it just feels very unintentional in that way. Whereas Bumble Friends, if you're trying to like network, the goal is to meet multiple people. The pressure isn't like, oh, if I message this one girl, I'm not allowed to message another. You know what I mean? So Obviously, that's a big difference. And I'm not trying to say that like my entire opinion on dating apps has changed because of Bumble Friends, but I think one of the biggest things is that pressure we put on ourselves, whether you're a guy or a girl coming from, a place of wanting to find a partner. It can be really defeating to feel like you're actively trying and then nothing is happening. Maybe we can share some other comments. Online dating can feel like swimming in shallow waters for the challenge of finding depth amidst superficial currents. Okay, who wrote that? Because I need to. Gifts authentic. That was a beautiful comment. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, online dating can feel like swimming in shallow waters for the challenge of finding depth amidst superficial currents. Now, what do I want to say about this? I think with women too, in Bumble Friends, women love to connect by like talking about deeper things or having deeper conversations. And I feel like it doesn't take much to get there. And I feel like sometimes dating on like a dating app, it can feel like just this, again, superficial back and forth or a little bit of banter and like, okay, you're kind of joking. But sometimes the conversations with men are also, it's like you can't necessarily get super deep with someone right away. And I think that that's understandable. It takes time to open up to people. And I think in friendship, you shouldn't necessarily meet someone right away and start like telling them your entire life story, like obviously to each their own. But I do think that there is a balance and like an importance in having some sort of filter for yourself in case it's just doesn't work out as a friendship. I don't know, unless you don't mind people knowing a lot about you. um but I think it's like when you're dating on an app looking for love, there needs to be this kind of spark, right? Like at the end of the day, you want to feel a connection with somebody. And I think because of the pressure that it can add, sometimes it's hard to get there. And I do know a lot of people who've met their partner on an app, by the way, and I know that it can happen. And I think the part I don't like is like everyone says, "Oh, you got to sift through." Like it's a lot of sifting to find the good ones. And it's like, "Yeah, but do I really want to spend my time swiping through people?" Plus, not to mention, I really don't like judging people based on like a few photos and a couple prompts. Like it's hard to really know, do they actually look like their pictures? Are their pictures old, or do they just not photograph well? Like there's so many factors I think that dating apps lead to like this, just this judgment that like, I don't know, that I find disheartening. Um and then okay, so the other thing of like comparing Bumble BFF with like a regular dating app to find love. And what I said in my last video is like the reason I don't like the apps is I really want to meet someone organically. And for me, organically means like, in a way, potentially being friends first or like meeting in a setting that is friendly and doesn't have all this pressure to like be a match almost. Because sometimes like feelings take a little bit of time to develop. You might not feel a spark right away, or you might feel a little something, but it's like you're kind of seeing if you can be friendly first or whatever. And I think on Bumble BFF, it's like there's no pressure because I'm not here to find love or like to find one partner. I'm here just to like network. And then it's like, well, why can't we look at dating like that? Why can't we look at dating like, hey, I get to meet someone new, or I'm potentially meeting a really cool person today, or I'm potentially networking. What if it's like there's not a vibe and we decide to be friends? Maybe that's someone else that I can connect with in some other way. And I think that that would be great if like the pressure was taken off and we could just kind of look at it as, hey, I'm going to go spend a couple hours, an hour or two with a stranger, and maybe they'll be cool. Maybe I could learn something from them. Maybe they'll have an interesting perspective about something. And maybe we won't vibe at all, but that's okay too. But I think the sad thing is like sometimes we feel this pressure of, you know, going out on a date means that the end result is this, or, you know, and the pressure can come from your own self, but the pressure can also come from the other person. And I have definitely been in dating situations where I did not feel respected and I did not feel safe and I did not feel, I felt like I had to be very careful of how I navigated getting out of the situation. And I think that's a sad reality for a lot of women is like we don't always feel safe dating, and the world should not feel unsafe to us. And sometimes that's the type of situation you don't know that you're getting into until you're there. So I think the safety net of Bumble Friends is like so fun because it is with women and it is a fun, safe space. And I think it's sad that a lot of people don't necessarily feel safe putting themselves out there in that way. And again, I am generalizing and kind of going off of my own experience. I just think it's super interesting to think about like just where these differences come in and how can we shift our mindset to make dating apps a little bit more enjoyable. So, okay, let's shift into me right now. So, I moved to Vancouver, and part of being in a new place is, not knowing a lot of people. So, did I decide to re download Hinge? I did. And I think I feel a lot more detached in a way, and I'm not spending very much time on it. I think I've been looking at it differently. Like now that I've been on Bumble Friends, I've kind of been looking at it more from a standpoint of like, I'm maybe networking here, or I'm just seeing if there's someone interesting out there. And I don't think I'm putting the pressure on myself of needing to find a certain thing or needing something to be a certain way. Because again, I think like you never really know if you're going to vibe with someone. You never really know like how something is going to go. And again, I think it's really that pressure that we put on ourselves mentally that kind of leads us to feel worse about it. So my approach has really been like, I know what I want, I know what I'm looking for, and I'm not in a rush. I think dating apps can make you feel rushed because you're seeing all these people, or you're swiping or whatever, and it's like, well, why is nothing happening? But, I think ultimately there's no harm in waiting to feel a connection with someone and waiting to really be interested in someone. I used to feel like I would go on a second date just because, even though I knew I didn't want to. And I felt like, oh, maybe I should just give this another go. And it's like my new mantra I read in the book Essentialism that I'm reading right now. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And I feel like this can apply to so many areas of our lives, whether it's we're trying to find a new job, whether it's we're meeting friends on Bumble BFF, whether it's we're trying to find a partner or we're open to finding a partner. It's like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. If I'm not very excited, if I don't really feel connected to this person, yes, I do believe that connections develop over time, but you need an initial spark. Okay. Like, I don't know if I was just pretending that like I would not like trick myself into liking someone, but just like, oh, with time, you never know. But it's like, okay, I have in the past really connected with people and I know that that feeling exists. So I think that also plays into the role of like not being in a rush and not trying to force anything, which again, I wouldn't do on Bumble Friends. I wouldn't try to force a friendship. If I met up with someone and didn't really click, I probably just wouldn't see them again and I could let that go and detach from that. Whereas again, on dating, it almost feels like a failure, or it feels like, oh, another one bites the dust, or okay, another date that was failed. But again, it's like we don't have to look at it that way. And another thing I think about dating that can be good if you look at it that way is, again, I mentioned this a bit earlier, but the chance to meet a lot of different people actually helps you narrow down like qualities that you like and don't like in a person. Like you might have thought, okay, I really want someone who is super similar to me in this way because we need to have like the same hobbies or something. But then when it comes down to it, you might actually realize after talking to people, like, oh, I think it's really interesting that this person has hobbies that are different from me. And that will actually give me space to be independent because we'll have different things that we like to do. Obviously, you want things in common, but like sometimes I think we build up in our head what we're looking for and what we want. But until you kind of test it out or like meet different people, you might actually not know, what that thing plays out to be in reality. So I think if we can have an open mindedness that dating apps don't have to mean all this pressure, I think it can end up being a more enjoyable experience. Am I over the moon and have completely changed my mind about the apps? Absolutely not. And it's still something that I don't really want to prioritize in my life. And I think, best case scenario, okay, here's my best case scenario for an app. Best case scenario is within a couple messages, I am asked to go and meet up for coffee or for a drink, for whatever. Because I personally, I think one of the biggest things I don't like about the apps is I don't want to get to know someone over text. I'm not a Tommy texter. We're not texting buddies. And I think it can be, maybe from a guy's perspective, it can be challenging to like initiate that and say, hey, we should do this. And like maybe girls want to text. And I think this is hard. Okay. Everyone is different, right? Like for me, I would rather know very little about you before meeting up in person because I just can feel, I get a better sense of who someone is in person. However, there are some people who might want to text for a longer period of time before they feel comfortable meeting up in person. And I totally get that. So I think this is another challenge with the apps is like everyone's preferences are a little bit different and we don't necessarily communicate that. Like I'm not going to have in my profile, if you don't ask me out right away, don't bother. Like, you know what I mean? That's in my head of like, I want someone who has that initiative. But on the flip side is if that's what I'm looking for, I can also tell like the people who are just not making anything happen, I'm okay to let that go. And if there is someone out there who's intentional and asked to meet up, then I'm more inclined to be like, okay, let's give this a chance. So I think it's like everyone's experiences are different. Everyone has a little bit different expectations, a little bit different goals. And I think ultimately the way I approach life in general is like everything that's meant for me will find me one way or another. So if I happen to meet someone on Hinge and I'm biting my tongue about how much I hate the apps, then so be it. I will admit that gladly. But I do think the reasons and like the challenges that a lot of people face on the apps are so valid. And I think it's so okay to not want to be on there and to, go on and then take a break or whatever that looks like. And I think I'm trying to have a more open minded approach to you never know what could happen. But if something's not making you feel good, don't do it. And if I'm feeling like I'm spending too much time on there, then that's when I need to take a break. So just being kind of mindful of that has been helpful for me. I do want to share one more or two more comments that were on the last episode. I'm a guy and I struggle with initial social interaction at times. So dating apps have helped with that. However, as you mentioned in the video, dating apps have a plethora of problems. It's hard to find someone on an app that wants to put in the effort, sadly. Yeah, definitely I can resonate with that. Like sometimes you feel like some people are just on there to be flirty or to play games or they have no intention of actually meeting up, right? And I think that that can be really challenging. So it also is hard to approach somebody in person these days. And I understand that. There was a lot of comments about that of, it can be challenging to approach someone in person. There's like a safety issue. Like a lot of women maybe don't want to be approached, or a lot of men feel uncomfortable approaching a woman just out in public. And so, again, I think everything can be approached with a grain of respect. Okay. Actually, I met a guy at the park the other day. I was reading a book and I guess he was too. I ended up moving into the shade because it got really hot. And then he kind of just said, "Oh, you got too hot in the sun?" I said, "Yep." And then we kind of just started chatting about the books we were reading, whatever. He told me a little bit about himself and where he's from. And we got to chatting. And it was a very, in my perspective, it was a very amicable and respectful conversation. I didn't feel like he was being weird or flirty or like so aggressive. I feel like there's a way to do it. Like, you can spark up a conversation and you have to learn to read people a little bit. Like, if I looked super uncomfortable, hopefully he could recognize that, okay, she's probably not interested in talking to me right now. You know what I mean? But I was fine to have a conversation. It was a quick chat. It was nice to meet somebody new. And like that was that. And, it wasn't this big, scary thing of like approaching someone. We just happened to be kind of near each other. Anyways, so I just think there's definitely a way to approach people in person, but the apps can definitely help. But I understand, yeah, it can be discouraging. And I think I'm having a lot of fun with Bumble friends because of the friendship aspect. And again, because finding multiple friends is okay. Whereas on a dating app, you ideally don't want to be finding multiple people. At least, like, that's not why I'm on there. So, yeah. Oh, and one more comment that was funny. You're young and pretty. You have all the options you want. The apps aren't the problem. You are. Okay. That's funny. I mean, I disagree. And you know what? I feel like pretty good because a lot of these comments don't really bother me. The apps aren't the problem. You are. Um, okay. But I mean, okay, I don't agree. You have all the options you want. Who says I want all the options? Who says I want a million options? I just want one good one, okay? So I don't know. I just think obviously there's so many different factors that kind of go into this. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. I would love to hear your opinions down below. How are you feeling about dating apps these days? Have you gone off, gone on? Has anyone tried Bumble Friends? If you haven't, by the way, I would highly recommend trying Bumble Friends if you are feeling like you want to build friendships. I think it can be a really great option because, again, it can be hard to meet people in person. And I think that for dating, for friendship, everything, it's worth a try. So if you've been feeling like you want to build a network a little bit and make more friends, I would highly recommend Bumble BFF. Not sponsored. All right, I'm going to stop blabbing. And that's the episode for today. I will see you next week. Bye.